Hello and welcome to Playwright, a brand new podcast about creativity, storytelling, and games. Think of this podcast kind of like the first day of a game jam. Every week we'll throw out and explore 3 completely novel, unique game ideas, dissect the ideas, iterate upon them, and find the heart and soul of a game hiding within. Our intention isn't really to build each of these games, but rather to expand the horizons of what fans of games can come to expect from the medium that they love. To push against the walls of creativity and explore uncharted soils for design and narrative. But first, some introductions. My name is Ryan Hamann. I am of the Cane and Rinse crew, the Cane and Rinse podcast. I am an audio editor on there. I used to do some on-mic stuff, which I don't anymore. I've retired to the audio editing sector there, but I do still host every other week Sound of Play, our video game music podcast on the Cane and Rinse network. And joining me as my co-host for this entire series, hopefully, is the similarly named Ryan Quintal.
Yes. I'm Ryan Quintal, and I'm here from, you may have heard me on Pixels Weekly or occasionally hanging out with you, Ryan, on Sound of Play.
Yes, one thing that we should address right off the bat is that we do both have the same first name, unfortunately.
It's true.
And so it's going to make things a little difficult. You can kind of use contextual clues to guess which Ryan either of us are speaking about.
We're tentatively throwing around maybe doing Q and H if you write in with listener mail.
Yeah. And if we ever have guests on the show, that just makes it a little bit easier. And so from this point forward, we're going to be referring to each other as Q and H. Myself being H and Ryan Quintal being Q. That is not because we think that having single letter names are extremely cool. Mm-hmm. We know.
But it is extremely cool.
I'm happy to take on that nomenclature for the sake of clarity on the show. So a little bit about this podcast. Think of this podcast kind of like a creative writing exercise, kind of building the discipline of ceaselessly creating. Great ideas come from the experience of 1,000 rubbish ideas before them. And this is a platform for the gaming community as a whole, really, to explore our wildest creative aspirations. Maybe they could be made into a game, maybe not. Maybe they're completely outlandish and completely unfeasible in the game creating space. It's not what we're here to discriminate against at this point. We just want raw ideas that we can kind of build with and explore. But we believe that each of you, the listeners, has the ability to imagine the next Minecraft, and we're here to explore the unexplored spaces together. Each week, both myself and Q will pitch a game idea, and we'll take a third game idea from the community, spending 10 minutes exploring and kind of marinating with each of them. Sometimes refining the fine details and just perfecting it until we get it to a point that we're really happy with, or sometimes taking the idea and completely approaching it from an entirely different perspective, ending up with a very, very different beast at the end. It's an exercise in kind of letting go of the ideas that we love and letting them be changed and molded, because you never know where it's going to take you. Our 10-minute time limit for each of these ideas means that we can't just spend hours and hours and hours with an idea that we really like. This isn't some sort of like industry circle jerk. Once the 10 minutes is up, that's it, really. It no longer belongs to us. It belongs to the community. And even if we only have kind of 60% of a final idea that we're really, happy with, even if there's still stuff in there that doesn't quite sit well with us, each member of our community will fill in that remaining 40% in their own minds. And, potentially in the Twitter space or the forum space or wherever, any types of conversations emerge in a completely unique and individual way. And that's just as exciting as anything that we can do on the show as well.
Yeah.
And so we're excited really to hear how you spin these ideas as well, because we don't intend for this to just be a purely expository process. We want the process to not stop when our time runs out. hopefully we're just really the incubation process that gives an idea legs that the community can run with itself.
This is partially for us, but it's totally for you, and it's for exploring all of those ideas, like you said. And I think you said it really well when you said that there's going to be a lot of rubbish ideas. I'm sure. In fact, I may have one for you this week. But it's so fun to just be creative and have a space where we can talk these things through and kind of workshop them lightly.
While I was shopping this idea around, this has been something that I've been wanting to do for a long time now. And it's been an idea that I've been kind of like working on in the background and kind of refining as I went. As I was kind of originally shopping it around, another podcast called Cool Games Inc. was brought to my attention. And I at least wanted to acknowledge that we know of it. It's from what I understand, I'm not a listener. This is all still kind of, new to me. It sounds lovely. It sounds really funny. I've listened to a little tiny bit of it. I am certainly not an expert on that show. It is, made by Nick Robinson and Griffin McElroy from Polygon, whose work I enjoy immensely, both of them individually. And so I'm sure it's a wonderful, wonderful show. But from my understanding of it, it sounds more like kind of an exercise in improv comedy and taking kind of ridiculous ideas and making really funny, speculative shows about them. And that is a really valuable contribution. And, especially the McElroy brothers can make me laugh like no one else. And I really strongly value that. I think we do kind of set a different course, though. And so I don't think that our podcast is redundant if you're a fan of that show. Instead of creating something like funny, which we will have laughs along the way, I'm sure. And we will kind of throw around some jokes and banter and stuff along the way. And that's totally fine. But like, we ultimately want to find the real heart in the ideas. And we want to ultimately kind of walk away with something that feels feasible, something that you can theoretically, at least in your own mind, hold in your hands on an iPhone or on an Xbox or something someday. As we mentioned before, we want community contributions. We want to hear your ideas as well. We'll always be taking community contributions, which can be sent to playwrightcast@gmail.com. That is play, as in playing a video game, write, as in write a book, spelled out WRITE. I know that the word playwright is not spelled that same way. It is a pun.
Or playwrightcast.com/pitch.
Yep. So you can submit through the website. You can submit through the email. You can also tweet us ideas at playwrightcast. That is at playwrightcast on Twitter. And we'll read our first community contribution next week. As a kind of semi-legal disclaimer, we want to state up front that by necessity of the format, any ideas that are submitted to and read on the show are surrendered to the community as a whole to do and iterate on these ideas whatever they want. They can create games or write books out of them in just whatever way they are inspired. We don't want the ideas to just kind of die on our show. And so if anything inspires you as a creator, whether you're a game maker or an author or an artist or a painter, then you have our full permission and the full permission of any of our community members that are pitching their ideas to the show to create and even sell any idea or any aspect of an idea read on our show. Just, be cool about others potentially also being inspired by the same idea as well. And let us know if you create anything inspired by anything that has taken place on the show, because we'd be super interested to hear about that.
Oh, yeah.
We'd love to feature and see what you've done. So I think that is a decent enough introduction to what we're going to be doing here on the show. But as the great writers before us have said, always show, don't tell. So we're going to start off our first episode with a couple ideas from Q and myself, and just to kind of kick this off and give you a sense of how all this is going to roll. So Q, this first idea is yours. Why don't you take us through the first idea of the show?
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks, H. We're going to get into that. I love city building games. I really do. I love SimCity and City Skylines. But one of the things about them is I feel like building a city has never realistically reflected what it takes to make a real city, which is a lot of different people working together and a lot of different people agreeing. So I had this idea kicking around that we would have a city building sort of style experience, but each almost think of an MMO sort of class structure where you are selecting into, I'm a housing and community person versus I'm a commercial person versus I'm an industrial person.
So kind of like an MMO bureaucracy.
MMO bureaucracy. That's a good tagline. Cities, MMO bureaucracies. Each player essentially chooses these classes, but what I think could be the compelling experience here is, as opposed to, I think SimCity has tried like connected cities and stuff in the past. Yeah. This is a little different in it that you're sort of Google Docs style collaborating in real time to build a city along with other people. And the community person, so I've got some bullets here, the community person is focused on designing these housing projects, making sure people have health and education, and commercial people are about, designing these great shopping experiences and maximizing profits. Industrial takes on a supply chain management sort of thing, and each of these people are designing their city together in order to get the people, the goods and services that they need and want in a sort of collaborative way.
This makes me think of Minecraft servers, which are kind of collaborative efforts for large numbers of people to end up creating something that is much bigger, much greater than any one of them could have created. Or even that new VR game, Star Trek Bridge Crew, I think it's called, where everybody plays a specific role. And I really like that. The thing that really sticks out to me about this idea from the beginning is that, unlike Minecraft, this isn't like everybody does have a specific job and a specific role, and they can't do each other's jobs, which I think is a more kind of honest portrayal of a real city building.
A bunch of desperate dependencies, right?
I think the biggest challenge about this is going to be the immediacy of gameplay, that if somebody gets really into it, then they potentially can't, sink 2 hours in an evening into it unless, Gerald from Idaho has done his part as well.
Right.
And so, kind of balancing, making the kind of immediacy of gameplay still rewarding while incorporating that fundamental asynchronous aspect of it.
Yeah, I kept wondering back and forth if you're in a situation where you could even have I really am just interested in, say, transportation or trade. Like, I think there could be a whole infrastructure person, right, for all of this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Are the rest of the people AI if I choose not to play online? I don't know about you, but usually always online games are generally an unfortunate choice when I'm playing a game.
Well, it really depends on the game. Kind of like that, like I mentioned earlier, that Star Trek Bridge Crew experience. I'm honestly, I'm not sure whether that can be played with AI, but from what I understand about the game, it seems like it would just fundamentally kind of ruin the purpose of that game to not play it with other people.
Yeah.
And so I think in this case, we don't need every game to appeal to every person in every situation. Like, I think it's okay to kind of build the occasional game, if it really does fundamentally improve the experience, to very specific qualifications. And so we can say, like, this can only be played with other people if it ends up that playing with AI is an undesirable result. Because if there is one human and the AI would only really kind of serve the purpose of impeding the goals of that one person, because there aren't other people that are also striving for potentially competing goals, and not competing in the way that rival cities or anything, but competing in the way that like there is a budget and everybody wants to do good things with it.
Right.
And there just isn't enough budget for everybody to do those good things.
Which is an interesting dichotomy. I think that, a city builder game has always kind of had the budget management aspect, but rarely have I felt the push and pull of, well, the commercial sector needs this and the industrial sector needs this. And they're both, of course, relying on infrastructure and everybody needs a job. So in the way that playing City Skylines, I think I've talked about before on another show, the fact that you almost had to have certain citizens making lesser money so that they would be qualified to work in, say, a factory is interesting from what kind of requests I'd have to, Ryan, could you please build, fancy commercial spaces because I've got rich citizens that really want, expensive places to shop.
To think about the kind of asynchrony of this, there's really two ways that I can see in my mind to kind of spin this off. This could either be like a really hardcore experience, really build it up into something like City Skylines, where everything is really fully realized. You get a really in-depth simulation that you really kind of have to count on people being online at the same time to like actually play together, or, something that's at least kind of a lightweight enough program that it's easy to load up maybe in, the corner of one screen and always kind of keep it going. Alternatively, and maybe easier, to build those systems into something a little bit more, I don't want to say casual, but something that is a little bit more lightweight and can be played on like a phone or something, where the asynchronous gameplay really thrives the most. I could see myself pulling up this if it were an app, seeing what all of my friends have done and contributing to the city. The downside of that, of course, being that you don't get the same maybe attachment to the city. You don't get the same, the 3D models of the buildings that you can swoop the camera through on a phone as you would like on a beefy PC. But it's kind of those trade-offs you'd have to make to incorporate the necessities of the asynchronous gameplay.
I think the phone is an interesting observation there because there's something that you're talking about that I think in terms of getting other people to play with you and collaborate that maybe needs to be baked in to the whole experience, whether or not this is, say, Civilization style turn-based, and you can really only make one or two improvements per turn, and sort of as the other turns are happening, you can sort of talk through what your expectations of the other players are and what they're, okay, I'm going to do this, but on your next turn, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, almost sort of Monopoly planning style, if that makes any sense.
It would be interesting to also kind of scale these classes of jobs. And so depending on how many players you have, the jobs could be broken up in different ways, sometimes more granularly if there are more players. And so if you only have like 3 friends, then, one person can be in charge of environmental management, cutting down trees, zoning spaces for, leveling the ground, and another person could be in charge of building, and then another person can be in charge of transportation. But if you had, 50 friends on a community server, then they could all have like very specific jobs. One person is in charge of running the subway, and one person is in charge of negotiating, like grocery trades with nearby farms and stuff. And so, it could really kind of scale to the breadth of the community. And maybe even installing some sort of like fail safes if one community member goes MIA for too long, to just kind of like do that person's job for them if they're away for 3 days or something like that. Can we send out an email
that says so-and-so has been fired? We wish them luck on their future endeavors.
It's an interesting idea. I think we're coming up against that 10-minute mark though. And so, we might still kind of experiment with the ideas, see if 10 minutes feels too tight or see if it feels just right. But I think as of right now, we're going to have to put the seal on that one.
Let's do it.
And throw it out to the community. If you have any other ideas about that particular idea, that collaborative MMO city builder, then feel free to tweet us, to email us, or to post it on the website, and we will be really excited to read, what else you have to say about it, and kind of keep this conversation going.
We might have to think of, with our pitches, names so that people can gravitate towards them. I'm going to go with Citywide.
Citywide. All right, I like that. All right, so this is my pitch. My idea is I'm going to do one of those blank meets blanks just because it's kind of an easy way to introduce it. This was actually an idea that I've had for a very, very long time. And so when I originally imagined it, it was Pong meets Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Whoa. I'm already excited.
Although the multiplayer mode of Tony Hawk where, I forget what it's called, tag battle or graffiti or something like that, where you have to skate on various objects in the environment and kind of claim them towards your color. Although in the time since I had this idea originally, a little game called Splatoon came out, and that ends up being a much, much more elegant way of pitching this idea. So let's call it, instead of Tony Hawk, Pong meets Splatoon. So you play as, one paddle of a Pong board, and each player has a color of paint, and when they hit the little Pong ball, it leaves a trail of paint behind it, and essentially you're trying to paint over as much of the game field as you possibly can.
Interesting.
Whether that means claiming new area or coloring over something that your opponent has already colored. And to make it more interesting, I'm going to introduce a couple little twists. One, I think that there could be, rubbish all over the play course, stuff that you can bounce the ball off of. And also you have a little bit more control over your paddle than you usually do in Pong type games. I'm thinking, played with a controller, left stick moves the paddle up and down the screen, and then the right stick you can use to rotate the paddle to get really kind of precise control. You can even curve the ball if you want to. Yeah. You can angle it in any direction. And then if you pull the thumbstick in one direction, it kind of pulls the paddle backwards, and you can release it to flick the paddle forwards and really hit that ball hard. Or you can, pull it back and just nudge the ball to bunt it, to use baseball terminology, to get it going really slowly. And so the trade-off would be getting it going really fast would give you a really thin trail of paint, but whenever it hits anything, it splatters. But when you move it slowly, it leaves a thicker trail of paint behind, but when it hits something, it doesn't have the same kind of splatter effect.
Oh, interesting.
And then, of course, the regular Pong scoring dynamic, where if you get it in the goal behind the other paddle, a large splatter of paint emerges from their goal, which is desirable because that would be, since it's so close to your space and probably the space that you have the least control over, that would be the hardest to repaint to your color. So you really don't want that to happen. It's really easy to see who's winning at any given time, but I also, because, everything is just two colors and you can kind of get a sense, if you blur your eyes, which color is more predominant on the field. But I also like the idea to not only visually indicate who's winning, but also to musically indicate who's winning. I like I have in my mind this idea that each color is associated with a little cartoon figure that represents a genre of music, and each musical track is composed of 10 instruments, and as you take over more of the field, based on the percentage of your coverage, one more instrument from your arrangement would play, and there would be one song that the game would play, but it would just play in different arrangements based on which character.
Sort of as one side paints more, it becomes more hip hop over heavy metal or something.
Yeah, more metal or more reggae or whatever, and so you can kind of get a sense of who's winning based on the way that the music sounds as well. So,
well, you did it. Let's call everybody and make this one because I want to play.
Well, no, I want to dissect and I want to take this in different directions. So let's kill my babies and see where we can take this. Let's start the clock.
Okay. Well, I really like this a lot. For a long time, I've been wanting to have a sort of brick breaker game with more Pong controls. So I think the right stick stuff is a huge win. I wonder if it's going to be difficult to. I feel like in those any sort of ball bouncy games, maybe the extra control takes care of this, but it's hard to like get the ball to ever go in particular areas, it seems. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but it just seems like, man, the bottom right corner, this ball has just never been there for whatever reason.
That's true. Yeah. Corners are always difficult to get in, which, I mean, it might kind of like add a little bit of like advantage to skilled players who are really good at precisely aiming. This was inspired by a free game called Ping. It's spelled Pingk because it is kind of like a pink Pong game.
Yeah.
But it had some really clever kind of iterations on the Pong mechanics where the paddles were curved, and so it was really easy to kind of like curve the ball, send it in different trajectories, or it made bouncing off the paddle a little bit more unpredictable. I think it'd be interesting to give them a little bit more control over the exact trajectory of where it goes. My biggest concern when I think about it is the obstacles in the course, which I think are kind of necessary because you want to have more objects to bounce the ball off of so that it can splatter more. But at the same time, there's the added difficulty of if a player is good enough, they can just keep on bouncing it off of objects and never give the opponent control of the ball. And that's a problem I've not been able to solve yet.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's more that could be explored with the debris. Like, I wonder if the debris is like, if you can hit the ball into a thing enough times, it sort of activates and spins and puts paint everywhere, or if there's like a sponge or balloon that once it hits enough times, whoever's color was last or most pops and kind of puts paint all over the place.
And I like those clown faces at the carnival that you fill with water and then the balloon on their head pops at the end. Yeah, that's interesting. Or, moving debris that kind of falls from the top like Tetris blocks, so it's a little bit more unpredictable. Or, and when I was thinking of this before, one of the solutions that I came up with was circular debris, because, it's not just a wall that you can keep bouncing it off of. There's some level of unpredictability to circles because, the many angles can send it bouncing in any direction. So eventually it should end up in the hands of the other person.
Yeah. And I hate to, have the war of escalation, but a la what we've seen with ARMS, I wonder if there's room for this to be even more than 2 players, There's, of course, that would break down, I think, maybe aspects of the composition thing, but I really love having like a character that's associated maybe with not necessarily a color, but a palette. And then they've got their sort of version of every song in the game. And so I'm almost like choosing my musical taste and trying to beat someone else's taste or something. That's cool.
Theoretically, like it could support up to 4 players, each on one side of the screen, and just kind of like madly bouncing this ball around the different quadrants. And that could be interesting. And there could even be like multi-ball power-ups that could send balls in different directions as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that this makes me think of now that we're talking about it is a game called Lethal League, which I play on Steam sometimes, which is all about, it's very kind of Windjammers-esque, where it's all about hitting like a baseball around this small enclosed space and trying to kind of like really bean your opponent with it, bouncing it off of walls and stuff. And it ends up moving pretty quickly, like faster than you can realistically track it. And so, maybe if enough players really just, spank that ball, then that can kind of lead to a compounding effect that can make it much faster than is really feasible to track.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see too, if in an idea like this, how you balance the sort of scoring points against I guess scoring points is just sort of laying down a big piece of paint somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Doing that versus sort of covering the entirety of the playfield, because I would almost think that like a shot that is maybe slower and easier for an opponent to hit should have some sort of benefit to me, so that I would consider doing it on purpose. Like maybe a slower shot lays down more paint, like you had said, and the fast shot is actually just kind of skips it across or something to sort of make it so if I really want to win the day, I'm incentivized to make it easier for the other person to score big points on me or something. That getting that feel right would...
Yeah, that risk versus reward is a very important thing of any competitive game. And yeah, like I don't quite have an answer for like what makes the slow shots like really worth it, other than, you know, it's kind of like in Splatoon having that giant paint roller and just being able to kind of like mow over like a huge portion of the playing field. But, you know, is it worth it if the opponent is given that much easier of a shot?
Right. And in fact, maybe the subtitle should be of our podcast, Playwright, we've got very few answers. Very few.
But that's what it's all about. It's about exploring. It's about and it's about pitching it back to the community and seeing what they come up with.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear people's ideas. I really can.
Let's close that one down and let's come up with a name for that. Now, I was not prepared with the title beforehand. Let's see. You see, I was thinking something like Color Wars, but I understand that can be taken in a way that I do not intend for it to be. But some sort of a...
Maybe it's Pallette Wars?
Pallette Wars is nice, actually. I like that.
Cool.
And of course, if anybody ends up making a game out of any of these things, feel free to title it whatever you want. These titles are not final.
Sure, right.
They are things that we are literally thinking of on the spot.
Yeah, and hopefully a way for you to find it if you forget which episode it happened.
Right. So that is going to wrap up our first episode. We did our introduction at the beginning. We went into Q's idea and then my own idea at the end there. And so that does fit our regular kind of 3-act structure.
Yeah, it's true.
Of all of these episodes going forward. It's just instead of having a lengthy introduction in future shows, we will have a community contribution from one of you, and we will dissect and explore one of your ideas. So we hope that you had a lot of fun listening. We're still kind of ironing out the format. This is very much a pilot episode and, you know, not necessarily the final iteration of what this is going to be. We're still exploring that along with you.
This is an open alpha.
Yep, exactly. So if you like it, please feel free to get in contact with us and tell us what it is about it that you like. If there is room for improvement, then we are openly accepting constructive criticism.
Absolutely.
Because that is really the MO of the entire show. And so who would we be if we do not accept constructive criticism from the community? It would be entirely hypocritical.
It's true.
We will conclude by reminding everybody that we'll always be taking community contributions, which can be sent to playwrightcast@gmail.com or on our website, playwrightcast.com, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast. And of course, as always, that is spelled PLAYWRITECAST. In all of those instances, all one word. Please do subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. We will continue with many more shows in the coming weeks. And we are just really barely starting out. And so the subscriptions, the ratings, any kind of interaction that we get with the community is greatly appreciated, especially at the very beginning. And, you know, since this is a brand new venture and since this is so unique, we're really kind of stepping out and doing something that we're taking a risk here. We would very much appreciate any spreading of it to your friends or, retweeting or just, making it known throughout your own networks. We're going to be doing the same, that we're going to be doing everything that we can to push this outwards. But we would very much appreciate you making it the bigger the community that we get, the more diverse ideas we'll have as well. So we hope that you're excited.
Everyone who loves video games has at some point had their own idea for a video game or a big change that they would like to see to an existing video game. And we I mean, if there has ever been a show for you, and I, I laughed about Cool Games Inc. earlier, and that is a great outlet for comedy. But I think we're the show where you can come and explore an idea and really talk it through in a space where you are going to be heard by hopefully a lot of people, and that we can celebrate just the uniqueness of it rather than kind of making sure that it's funny or pithy or catchy or rememberable. So all of that stuff.
Yes, thank you for joining us on this maiden voyage and this pilot episode. I have been Ryan Hamann. You can find me on Twitter at InsertCoins, but spelled without the E. That is INSRTCOINS.
And I'm Ryan Quintal, and you can find me at Ryan Quintal, QUINTAL on Twitter.
Our theme song is Hello World from the album Blue Noise by Protodome. Very cool dude. Go and check out his music. He graciously allowed us to use his tune for our podcast. We will see you next week.
Bye.